has been destroyed.
Raisman now telling the improper Bostonian magazine that she hasn't worked out in months and still regrouping after that confrontation, and that she's constantly reliving her abuse. Nasser pled guilty to molesting women and girls under the guise of treatment for injuries. He's now in prison. Michigan State University has since reached a $500 million settlement with Nasser's victims. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The police officer who is accused of shooting and killing Antoine Rose will be charged with criminal homicide. Rose was shot when he was running away from a traffic stop by East Pittsburgh officer Michael Rosfeld. Allegheny County DA Stephen Zappala says Rosfeld's story didn't add up and that Rose was not involved in an earlier drive-by shooting that warranted a police presence.
By all accounts, Mr. Rose never did anything in furtherance of any crimes in North Braddock.
Police say Rosfeld fired 3 shots at Rose when he was running from the car he was in. The driver of that car was taken into custody. Police say they found an empty gun clip in Rose's pocket, but no weapon. It was one of the deadliest diseases of the first half of the 20th century, but now the polio virus is an ally in the fight against a deadly form of cancer. Fox's Tom Rigotti reports.
The polio virus has been turned into an immune system therapy to fight deadly brain tumors. Doctors say survival was better than expected for some patients in a small study who were given a modified form of the virus. It helped their bodies attack the cancer. It was the first human test, and the virus didn't help most patients or improve median survival. But researchers say many who did respond seem to have long-lasting benefits. About 21% were alive at 3 years versus 4% in a comparison group of previous brain tumor patients. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
And officials in Lincoln, Nebraska are inviting residents to help test out an all-electric driverless shuttle bus for a pilot program that could bring more autonomous vehicle services to the city. The public will have a chance to reserve a 15-minute ride on the bus starting Thursday. The shuttle will be conducting trial runs at the Nebraska Innovation Campus in Lincoln until mid-July. Lincoln was loaned the self-driving shuttle with a $100,000 grant. That is American Family News for this hour. For more news and information, including details about the retirement of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, visit onenewsnow.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
I'm an organizer and activist. I engage in civil disobedience like 20 times a year. In fact, the Women's March and our partners are organizing the largest women's civil disobedience this Thursday about ending family separation and ending family detention. And Dr. Martin Luther King warned us about people like Chuck Schumer. He said it wasn't the Ku Klux Klan and the white citizen counselors who are the obstacles towards justice. It was the people calling for, quote, civility, and people that were telling us when to protest, at what time, and how to protest. And I need to let people know that when we talk about civility, it is not civil to rip babies from their mothers. It is not civil to break up Muslim families. It is not civil to take away health care from millions of Americans. So you want to talk to me about civility? Let's make sure that we're engaging in justice, ensuring that every American has access to things like health care and housing, that there is no poverty in America, and that children are with their mothers. And I was at the airport yesterday, LaGuardia Airport, and I recorded a video of children, I'm talking between ages 5 to 8, that were that came off a United Airlines flight, who are unaccompanied minors. And I am distraught that we live in a country talking about civility, but we don't see the same outrage about.
Wow. Welcome to Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Guess what? Linda Sarsour suddenly cares about the children, y'all. She's got her hijab all wrapped up super, super tight, maybe so tight she can't have synaptic functions operating within normal parameters. But, you know, who cares, right? Welcome to the show. We have a fantastic lineup for you today. We have two guests, Caleb Howe, who's the morning editor for Mediaite, also a contributor to PJ Media. He's going to come on and talk to us about this idea that somehow President Trump is participating in bringing forth Osama bin Laden's dream of an epic war with 1 billion Muslims arrayed against the West, primarily the United States and Israel, and how ridiculous that is. And Caleb Howe is not exactly a fan of President Trump's. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for years, and he's an outstanding writer and thought shaper for the right. And it's going to be a pleasure to chat with him about this. It's that we can agree, but does everyone you disagree with have to be Hitler or a friend of Osama bin Laden's? I don't think so. We'll talk to him about that. And then in hour 2, we have Carmine Sabia Jr., Christian conservative political pundit. He's going to come on, talk to us about current events, which big breaking news of the hour, of the day, really. I'm sure this is going to be the news of the week, is that Justice Kennedy is retiring. Now, this was expected. We've been speculating about this and talking about it here on the show for at least a year. And it has been between him and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which of the two of them will decide to step down first. And so, you know, we have a lot of options here. The president has a list of 25 individuals that's been vetted by Heritage and other conservative organizations. And so he'll probably be pulling from that list. But the question that you might have on your mind, and we'll be discussing it here today, is if the president already has a list chosen, that means the Democrats already have their opposition strategy laid out. And I'm certain it has something to do with the fact that the president is still under investigation, but there is no good reason for him not to quickly appoint someone and have them run through the confirmation process and then confirmed. Really, there's no reason. We need to have them there so that when the next SCOTUS, their season, if you will, when it opens in the fall and they begin to review cases, they have a full slate of judges there who can review the information and go through the process. So it's interesting to see this announcement come today on the heels of two very interesting court cases that were just decided that we discussed yesterday. And then today, a new case was announced, a decision. Janice is a case about unions and the right for individuals who work for state governments, local governments, and the federal government. That's the highest percentage of unionized individuals. Less than 10% of people in the private sector are unionized, but in government, meaning your teachers, your firefighters, the people who you interact with when you go down to your municipal center or your little, town center. Also, those who work for the federal government. 35% of those workers are unionized, and the majority of what they give to the unions does go to collective bargaining, but a significant percentage, up to 35% of what is given, is turned over directly to the Democrats 95% of the time. 95+% of union giving at the public sector unions, 95% of that money goes to Democratic candidates. So it is a de facto arm of the Democrat Party, and their get out the vote efforts are legendary. If you want to understand how to get out the vote, you should check in with your public sector union affiliated relative or friend or neighbor, because they know how to get out the vote. That is the majority of their effort during the workday. They're actually paid to do union work during the workday, and the union work is not organizing or collective bargaining. They only engage in collective bargaining once every contract period. The majority of the work that they do is selecting candidates, vetting candidates, making sure that people who are block captains and do other good work for the get out the vote efforts are prepared. And so it's interesting. And this whole thing really exposes something to the American public that many, many people just don't know. If you weren't one of the people who was paying attention when all the video came out from the conference that the National Education Association had in Chicago, where one of their leadership of the NEA said, this union doesn't exist to educate kids. We're not here for children. We're here for you. We represent you, and you are our primary subject matter. We work for you. We advocate for you. The union exists for you. So yeah, you're teachers and you teach kids, but the union is for you. It was really a groundbreaking moment because most people assume that teachers are so interested in the education and welfare of their students that a statement like that would be met with shock and disgust. But instead, that person was given a standing ovation. And when the video went viral, they didn't walk it back. They said, what would my primary function as a union leader be other than to represent the membership of my union? And so that doesn't impugn teachers. That doesn't mean teachers don't care about their kids, but it does mean that unions, as they exist, National Education Association especially, they don't take responsibility for the carnage they've wreaked on all of the educational system here in the United States. They don't take responsibility for the lower test scores and higher spending and fewer good results that come out of our public schools. But they do show as a benefit to their membership that teacher pay is on the upswing, benefits are better than they've ever been before, and their retirement packages are fat. So this is, you know, in order to ascertain what's going on with a subject matter, you have to be willing to just sit down and say, look, what is this? It's the National Education Association. Who are they there for? The teachers. What have their results been? Geared towards teacher pay and advancement and making sure that they have good benefits. And I personally, as a former school board member, I see nothing wrong with that. I see nothing wrong with individuals who want to organize into associations or groups advocating for their pay. But what I noticed on the public sector side is that there's one person's interests who are missing at that table, because as a school board member, I'm there to represent the interests of the school district. Yes, I'm elected by the taxpayers, but there's no one there who's strictly a taxpayer advocate. School board members have elections to think of. Elections mean they have a voter base that kind of dictates what their decisions are going to look like. And if you're in a school district that is run by the NEA and the NEA membership organizes for elections, that means a school board member doesn't really advocate on behalf of taxpayers first. They advocate on behalf of the electorate first, which is comprised of NEA members, which means dual loyalties. So I didn't have that problem in the school district where I was, but I do remember sitting in on the negotiations for the school board. You know, it's when the union bargaining period opens up. And I remember sitting there and thinking that this was so much different than I thought it was going to be. So this is an important ruling. It doesn't impact private sector unions. So if you're in a union in the private sector, you know, more power to you. Good for you. Excellent work on your behalf. Hope your union is satisfying what you're looking for them to do. But on the public sector side, you can no longer be forced as a condition of employment to join the union and pay dues. That's just no longer something that can happen. So it is a ruling that really benefits workers. And, you know, we can disagree about the serviceability and the good positive benefits or negative, contraindications of having the unions in the public sector, and whether or not that's something that we want to see going forward. And just like any political topic, we can all have our own opinions. It doesn't mean anyone's a Hitler or a Nazi, you know, disclaimer, no cattle cars parked out back of our house, none of that stuff. But this is a great ruling for people such as the plaintiff and so many millions of other people who just don't want to be a part of funding Democratic get out the vote efforts through their pay. Now the landscape will change. In anticipation of this ruling, we've seen a number of states that are heavily unionized, namely New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and California, have already preemptively struck out when they realized that the Janus ruling, everyone has said from, far and wide, left to right, everyone has anticipated that the Supreme Court would rule on for Janus in this decision. And so preemptively striking out, Governor Cuomo in New York City signed legislation that says that union officials, as a condition of your employment for a public sector job in New York, you have to agree to give out all of your contact information, and you have to agree to be contacted by the union during the workday, which was prohibited up until this piece of legislation was passed. And Cuomo made a statement saying that he's doing this because he wants to protect the right for unions to exist, and he wants to protect workers. But what this means is before, the union person had to make an appointment with you or take you out to dinner or take you out to coffee, lunch, something like that, away from the workplace. So if you said no, they couldn't keep talking to you about it at work. What this means in New York City and other states may likely try to pass these types of legislation as a workaround around the Janus SCOTUS decision is that you're never free from union people approaching you and trying to get you to join the union. You're just never free. There's no open period where they can talk to you about it, and then it closes, and then you can be free to get about your work. It's just constant. It's like the water drop method. How do you crack a big stone if you don't have a huge, special bit circular saw or some kind of heavy equipment? Well, you can drop water on it for a while. It'll take a while, but eventually that rock will break. That's the concept that's being put forward here. And I just, what you strike down one problem, another one pops up in its place. It's like whack-a-mole. But at least with this SCOTUS decision, it takes away the actual impetus. There is no longer a law that can supersede this, that can force people to join unions. So I have to talk to you guys today about this new phenomenon that has happened. And this is really, I spent a lot of time thinking about this morning, and I think, we've talked so many times here on the show about what happens when we as Christians, when people in general, really, because these concepts apply to all. When you know that something is wrong and you go for it anyway, maybe you go for it because it's the end is justifying the means. You need to do this in order to win. Let's just put it simply. So whatever it is that you're seeking to do, you have some misgivings about it. You may even feel like there's a better way to do it, but you're going to go this route because it's the fastest route to you winning. And that's what we've seen with the Democrats over the past 4 decades, is that they've taken the fastest route to winning. And so when the fastest route to winning was unions, they took that route. When the fastest route to winning was black people and racializing everything, they took that route. And then now it's most recently been refugees and immigration is the fastest route to them winning. We're going to talk about today on the show how the result of that is that the Democrats no longer hew to their traditional ideology, which was very American, very patriotic, very God-fearing, just different than the Republicans. Because they've taken on this socialistic bent, they're now faced with a very stark reality, which is they can never be socialist enough for the people they've imported into the country and the children they've educated over the past 40 years into believing in socialism. The proof of that is in the wave of elections that just passed through last night. There were primary elections, and the most interesting one was in New York City, where a young woman of 28 years old who raised 1/10 of the Democrat that she was primarying, the Democrat being the man who was the successor to the Nancy Pelosi gavel, the minority gavel. He was next in line for that. He'd been in Congress for years, very powerful individual. She primaried him and ran on abolishing ICE, universal health care for all, and the people first, which is socialist talk. She is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, and she beat him last night. The reverberations of that win are still echoing throughout the country, where Democrats they barely care that Kennedy has announced his resignation because something of a shift, a seismic shift, occurred in New York City. And it will continue to occur across the country as people who've been brought up to believe that ideology and demographics are all that matters turn to socialism because they were taught to do so by the Democrats. The ones who taught them these things will be forced out, and that's a new reality for them. So we'll get into that as well. We have more for you coming up after these wonderful messages. Stay there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, we only go to the Holy Land once a year, and that's in March. Last year, we filled up several months in advance. So if you want to go in March of 2019, it's time to look at the details. You can get a brochure from us at 800-FAMILIES, 1-800-FAMILIES, option 5, and leave us your name and your telephone number, or go to twholyland.com, twholyland.com. It's going to be a wonderful time in Israel. We'll go to the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the holy city of Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Masada, the Dead Sea, and on the list goes. If you'd like to go with us in March of 2019, all the information is available at twholyland.com. Order a brochure by calling 800-FAMILIES, option 5.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. Recently, I saw a Christian leader being interviewed on television. Now, I was glad this man had had considerable experience in dealing with the secular press. The interviewer asked the leader a few friendly, warm, easy questions at the beginning, but it was a classic ambush. Then in rapid-fire succession, he threw out questions that were really conclusions, demanding wisdom and skill to handle. But God gave the Christian leader not only the ability to avoid the trap, but also to present a very inviting and appealing witness for Christ. I really was glad this man knew what he was doing. This is a reminder that not everybody has honest, good intentions. Some people are so driven by getting what they want that they'll resort to scheming to make it happen. Now, to be strategic in our approach to life and to accomplishing our objectives is not wrong. We ought to be wise and with how we approach things. We're to be shrewd, but not dishonest. Shrewd, but not manipulative. Deception and dishonesty in order to get what you want is flat out sin. From Genesis to Revelation, God really has strong things to say about deception and manipulation. In Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 through 18, God lists these schemers as part of what he hates. There are 6 things which the Lord hates, yes, 7, which are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, and here it is in verse 18, and a heart that devises wicked plans. Did you get that? God says that he hates a heart that devises wicked plans. Sinful means are never justified, even if the goal is pure. Here's what I want you to remember and do today. Don't scheme.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
ICE's job is to keep us safe and follow that up. Go ahead. What's the problem?
Yeah, sure. That's the misinformation that's out there, right? The president keeps saying we're doing this to stop all the crime, all the MS-13. I think it was 228 people at the end of the last fiscal year out of over 300,000 that came to the border were MS-13. So again, he's taking an entire group of people and branding them as criminals, which is just false. So
how many people, how many illegals, Congressman, how many illegals have you captured?
So either the president is grossly
how many people have you cracked down on?
The most uninformed president since I've been on the planet, 53 years.
We're talking about ICE. We're talking about ICE.
No,
you want to get rid of people.
This is the problem.
You want to give people that are putting their lives on the line, making an average $61,000, and telling them, you told me in the break, their brand has been so damaged. Their brand is keeping America safe, cracking down on illegals here.
Brian,
and you seem more concerned about illegals than you are about the men and women who decide to go through the academy and qualify for ICE.
Okay, so, Brian, that was a great morning dose of rhetoric. You did a great job on that.
Well,
but
that's your review of what I said. Those cold
Brian, you gonna let me talk? Okay. So what I'm saying is we're not going after the average criminal. What you're supposed to do is go after people who pose a real threat. It was created after 9/11 with the main focus being around people who might have terrorist activity. Now we're going after people with a traffic violation at a church or at a workplace. That doesn't make any sense. So the president's using it as his own police force. That is something that's completely wrong.
This is all your opinion. You have no
that's
stats,
the facts, Brian.
and you decide that you have something you think you can run on while you're diminishing the credibility of people putting their lives on a daily basis to allow to go crack down on illegals amongst us. Why do you care about more about illegals and their safety and welfare than Americans' safety and welfare?
Oh, my goodness. So much there to unpack. So let's just run it down real quick. Welcome back to the show, Urban Family Talk, American Family Radio. Fantastic to be with you today. Oh, yeah, it's hump day. It's Wednesday. So you're halfway through the week. If you love going through the week, then you're probably feeling a little reticent. You don't want the week to end. If you're looking forward to the weekend, you're like, woohoo, halfway there and keep chugging along. Either way, it's Wednesday. So what we have going on now is this. So it's Brian Kilmeade and this Democrat, and he is making the case for basically saying if Immigration and Customs Enforcement is prosecuting people for being in the country illegally only, so they violate a traffic ticket, they're speeding, whatever. And, you know, goodness knows we all have those moments. Nobody is immune to making a mistake. But what he's saying is you shouldn't be deported because of that. Well, here's the problem with what he's saying. No one's being deported because they've run a red light or they have, a ticket. They're being deported because they're in the country illegally. So the president prioritizing deportation based upon you being in the country illegally as opposed to you being a MS-13 machete beheading person is absolutely ludicrous. The president should be able to have ICE follow the directives of what's in the law, period. Period. Have you ever, like, I wonder, could I say, you know, if I get pulled over for speeding, could I say, but I was only speeding. It's not like I'm in the country illegally. Don't prosecute. I mean, you can't give me a ticket for that. You can't give me a ticket for just speeding. I need to be doing something like beheading someone in order for you to actually do anything. Just let me go. How do you think that'd go over? I can tell you now, it's not going to go over well. There is no police officer. Now, they might let you go with the warning if you have a good demeanor and you just get the luck of the draw. But most of the time, they can't let you off with a warning because they have to track every time they pull someone over. And they have to have a certain number of tickets that they write for the number of people that they pull over. So the fact that they're pulling you over means they're probably going to have to give you a ticket. I mean, I remember getting off with a warning a lot when we lived in Florida. I was younger. I had a Ford Mustang. I was a little bit of a speed demon. All I had to do was be in uniform and smile and say, "What seems to be the problem, officer?" Like that. And they would always say, "You were speeding." And I'm like, "Was I'm not sure." And he'd say, "You were going this and that. That's above the speed limit." And then I would say, "I'm sorry about that. It's just such good weather, isn't it?" And then the officer would say, "It is. Get out of here, but slow down. I'm watching you." And then I would, get off, no ticket. We moved to the Midwest. I tried that garbage. First of all, the state troopers in Missouri, they don't even smile. They're just like, "Can I see your driver's and registration, please?" Like, "Yes, what seems to be the problem?" "You were exceeding the speed limit by 8 miles an hour." I'm like, "Oh, are you aware that the speed limit in this area is 65? I don't remember seeing a sign. Signs are posted, ma'am. See you in a minute." Go back to the back, write your ticket, come back, give you the ticket. No joking around, no smiling, nothing. So, but the point is, it doesn't matter whether I'm smiling or not smiling or speeding 5 over or 8 over or 15 over. It doesn't matter. What matters is if law enforcement chooses to prosecute for something, it's your job to stay within the realm of not breaking the law or suffer the consequences. And that doesn't mean I don't have any sympathy for people. This isn't about sympathy. But when he says, and this is the last point I'm going to make on this, because we have a lot of content to get through since we have this new breaking news that we're going to have to discuss. We're going to have to unpack the retirement, and Mitch McConnell's issued a statement. So I'm going to get to that. So just let me wrap it up by saying this. The most ridiculous thing that he said in that audio clip is that only 258 MS-13 members entered the country. I guarantee you that if we go and look up the Remembrance Project or any one of these organizations that helps families after their children have been killed by illegal immigrants, and we talk to them and say, your child was killed by MS-13, and if that group of MS-13, that 8 or 9 individuals who kidnapped your child and raped them and then killed them, hadn't been here, your child would still be with you. I guarantee you they would go and forcibly protest in the face of that Democrat by saying, "But if they weren't here, then my kid would still be here." You see how that works? So his statements were not just ridiculous. They're the kind of thing that he should be unseated for that. He should be unseated for saying that only 283 MS-13 made it into the country. Those 283 MS-13 probably contributed to a huge spike in crime in the areas that they ended up in. And the deaths and carnage that are directly connected to those guys now rest with that guy because he feels like it's no big deal that they're here. Sorry, that's just the truth. So let's talk about Mitch McConnell's statement, and then we have a little bit more audio for you. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says the Senate will vote in this fall on the new Supreme Court justice to replace retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy. Now, it's interesting, side note, when I was reading up on this, when the news broke, my email box started filling up and I started reading the links and everything. And it was fascinating because Reason.com does periodic reviews of the decisions and opinions that the Supreme Court justices make. And they found that Neil Gorsuch is actually to the left of Anthony Kennedy based on the opinions that have been issued by Neil Gorsuch in comparison with the opinions that have been issued by Anthony Kennedy in this session. So that's just to go to show you that there are so many different ways that the justices can rule on different individual issues. And it depends really largely on obviously their opinion on it, what case law is more impactful to their decision, and where they see themselves going, not just in that session, but in their entire jurist career, like the entirety of their time on the bench, the decisions that they've made, and it kind of creates a doctrine or a path, a way that people see them and view them in the end. And I want to point that out to you because I don't want you to forget that Neil Gorsuch, even though he's considered to be the new conservative, he replaces Antonin Scalia, that if Anthony Kennedy is to the right of Neil Gorsuch for this particular session, then the idea that Democrats will put forward, you'll start to hear those calls within the next few hours. Within the next 24 hours, you'll start to hear Democrats say that a conservative justice in Neil Gorsuch has already been appointed. And now, in order to reflect the populace of the United States, a conservative judge would be too much for the American people. What we need is someone who's a moderate. And any moderate judge is really a liberal. There are no moderate judges. There are the liberals, and then there's the conservatives. That's all there is. But the Democrats are going to try, by hook or by crook, any means necessary, whether it's saying that President Trump can't appoint someone because he's just two shakes of a doggy tail from being impeached, or that for some reason a conservative judge appointed by Donald Trump, that just isn't fair to the American people. So watch out for those arguments. They're going to come. They're coming on down the pipeline. And now I want to flip over to, and this is the wrap up. This is the remainder. What we now have is proof that Sarah Huckabee Sanders' father, former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, the story that he told on Fox News has now been validated because they went to Lexington, Virginia, and they've interviewed the bed and breakfast owner of the bed and breakfast that Sarah Huckabee Sanders and her husband and their children and their extended family on her husband's side were staying at. They were staying at this bed and breakfast and visiting Lexington. And while they were there, they traveled from the bed and breakfast. They went to dinner at the Red Hen. They were served the cheese board and their drinks. And then Sarah was asked to leave. She said, "I will leave. Would you like me to pay?" They said, "No, don't pay. Just you have to leave. Not your whole party, but you." She left with her husband. They got in their car and drove back to the bed and breakfast. And that's when some very interesting things began to happen. Let's listen to number 3.
The restaurant, whose owner asked the president's press secretary to leave over the weekend, will remain closed for several more days. That owner has also now just resigned from a local business organization there. Meanwhile, many in the small Northern Virginia community fear their business may now suffer. Correspondent Doug McKelway is in Lexington again tonight.
Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee are both buried in Lexington, Virginia. Reminders that some civil wars are not as soft as the one Lexington is experiencing today. Numerous shop owners refuse to talk to us about the Red Hen controversy, wary that if you take a side, you risk alienating half your customers.
It's very painful for me what's happening in this country. The meanness, and I'm sorry, I'm liberal, but I'm not happy with those that are mouthing off on either side.
I hope you're not only just talking to the people that supported this woman. What she did is really embarrassment to all of us.
The Red Hen's owner, Stephanie Wilkinson, was also until today the executive chair of an influential business group here, Main Street, Lexington. She resigned from that post this afternoon, according to published reports.
After Sarah and her husband left and the family relocated to a restaurant across the street, the owner of the Red Hen then organized an effort to go and scream at them from the sidewalk at the other restaurant.
So that's the part of this story that really is disturbing, because with the restaurant owner, the owner of the Red Hen, coming out and saying that she would do it again, you're probably thinking, oh, she would ask her to leave again. And that in and of itself, you know, regardless of political ideology, asking someone to leave your place, your establishment, your place of business, we're not talking about rudeness. We're talking about her right to do it under the law. No shirt, no shoes, no service. She has the right to ask someone to leave as long as she's not doing so because of their ethnic background, their country of national origin, or their race or other innate characteristic. So federal law does not bar her from asking someone to leave the restaurant. So if she says, I would do that again, then you could say, oh yeah, you know, not a big deal. But then you look a little closer and you hear the rest of the story. Oh my goodness. She left her own restaurant, gathered people. She texted and got a bunch of people together, went across the street to the restaurant they went to. Now she's out of bounds. These people have left. She asked them to leave. They left. Sarah Huckabee Sanders and her husband went home with no dinner. And what is she doing? She's going to follow them and harass them in the next location. So let's listen to the remainder of this. It's It's number 4.
Huckabee's story confirmed by the man who hosted the Sanders family at his bed and breakfast.
It's just an unfortunate situation, because I guess, again, if you're trying to make a statement, make the statement. Don't keep screaming it, and follow people or what have you.
200 miles to the north, a congressman who was nearly killed by a gunman with extremist views knows how far such incivility can go.
I know firsthand, we've got to be real careful about how we discuss our differences. The great part of America is that we can discuss our differences freely and openly, but we also have a responsibility to make sure that we're not trying to incite others to violence.
More Democrats are joining Senate Minority Leader Schumer's call for civility. A spokesman for Virginia Democratic Senator Tim Kaine told the Richmond Times-Dispatch that he, quote, believes in civility and respect from everyone are important to a functioning democracy.
We're told that the Red Hen restaurant, which had been scheduled to reopen at 5 o'clock this afternoon, will now remain closed until July 5th. And for the first time, as you can see, we are seeing protests here today. They're winding down right now. Only one arrest thus far. A Donald Trump supporter threw a bucket of chicken manure in the direction of the building. He was promptly arrested.
Okay. So this validates the story about her following over, and it really kind of wraps up the idea here. I don't agree with people throwing buckets of chicken manure. I think the people who are over there protesting the restaurant are getting what they want out of it. The restaurant has not reopened. The woman has materially damaged her standing in the community, and she's going to have difficulty with keeping the business staffed, because with only half of your customer base coming in because they now know what your political ideology is and they disagree with the stand that you took, you have to have that half of the populace who would visit your restaurant visit twice as much. I mean, do you get what I'm saying here? These people are literally the ones who make a stand against half of the voting population. Half of the dollars out there available to buy their product are making a stand that will hurt their bottom line eventually, because if you're saying only liberals can come eat here, then only liberals will come eat there. But liberals aren't only going to eat at the Red Hen. Sure, in the beginning, liberals will eat there and eat there and eat there. But after a while, you're going to want something else. Who hasn't had the best pot pie in the world, which in my opinion, the best chicken pot pie out there, that if you're going to buy one, is at Whole Foods. They make a pot pie in-house with their own recipe that you can bring home, and you bake it in the oven for 40 minutes, and then you eat it. And I think it's the most amazing pot pie that exists in the world today. That's not made by like somebody at their house. But am I going to eat that pot pie twice as often as I normally would if Whole Foods says they're not going to serve liberals? No, I'm just going to eat as much pot pie as I want to eat. And then after that, no offense, but I'm not going to eat twice as much pot pie. Why would I do that? It's actually kind of fattening. Like, it's a treat. So this is not a smart tactic for them to be taking. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I understand you're mad, but come on. Like, if you're a business owner, you got to be mad on your private time, because you got employees. You have people who work for you who need you to make smart choices. Anyway, when we get back, we're going to have Caleb Howe. He's the morning editor for Mediaite and contributor to PJ Media. Stay right there.
I just thank God for the Holy Ghost. If you will let him, he really will teach you all things. Have you ever made an excuse to someone why you were unable to do something, or why you couldn't attend a certain event, instead of just being honest and telling them you just were not interested? I think many of us have. Well, that's lying. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 17 says, an honest witness tells the truth. A false witness tells lies. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 1 in one translation says, dishonesty in business disgusts the eternal. It disgusts God. But fair dealing delights him. False witness utters lies. Be faithful and consistent with being honest with others. Stop with the excuses and be truthful. There is freedom when our integrity and character reflects our Savior, Jesus Christ. What seems little to us are big to him. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors. even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
Hal, I'm Calvin. I grew up in the projects, and my mama warned me about drugs and gang, but I didn't listen. But now I'm drug-free. My mama can't thank Teen Challenge enough for turning her son around.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Yo, what up, Sid?
Yo, what's up, Mike? How you doing?
Man, I'm good, bro. Just left the club, the usual.
The club? Man, them clubs don't love back, man. You ain't learned yet. You better slow down, dude.
Ah, come on, Sid. You remember those days? We used to turn up together, man.
Used to, brother. I'm on something much different.
Like what, though? I mean, that Jesus music you be rapping about or beatboxing or whatever you be doing.
I'm saying, though, that's how I worship. God gave me rap, so I give it back.
Why, though? Gospel rap is boring, man.
Boring? There's nothing boring about the ransom that ransomed me with himself. Took me off the shelf to transform me into my best. Surrounding me with those of like minds. He drops bombs, some of which is found on UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's Hump Day. It's also woohoo, Justice Kennedy is retiring day. A de facto holiday for all of us who want to see another conservative appointed to the court and love the list of nominees that are in the hopper that the president has already produced for us to take a look at months ago, even before he was actually sworn in as president. So it's my pleasure to welcome our next guest, Caleb Howe, morning editor for Mediaite. He's also a contributor to pjmedia.com and overall thought leader on the right and really a moderate voice who often opposes the president intelligently, but is not afraid to also say kudos to the president when he deserves it. Caleb, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. We've got MSNBC's Steve Schmidt spewing this theory that President Trump and the Supreme Court of the United States are actually fulfilling Osama bin Laden's vision in upholding what is a travel ban against a number of countries, not just Muslim nations.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's really unbelievable. The quote, he actually called it a fantastic fulfillment of Osama bin Laden's vision by Donald J. Trump, little pomp and circumstance that he slapped on there for his prepared remarks on MSNBC. Schmidt is formerly a Republican strategist, and he recently made a lot of news when he said he was done with the Republican Party.
Okay.
Basically because of Donald Trump.
And I get it. There are certain things people just won't tolerate, and everyone has a right to be affiliated with whatever party they want. But I feel like the point that you're making in your piece is that there's danger in saying this isn't factual, and there's danger in that.
There is, right. Well, I mean, the problem is there's a number of problems with what he said. There's the surface problem, which is that it's just an incorrect and terrible thing to say about an American president overall. But it's specifically wrong about the case that was handed down yesterday, the decision that was handed down yesterday, which wasn't even really a judgment on the travel ban at all. So to say in the wake of the decision that what happened in the Supreme Court was a fulfillment, and that's what his implication is there. It's not just it's not just Trump, it's the Supreme Court justices who voted, who handed down their decision, have also fulfilled Osama bin Laden's vision. So it is a really strange and awful thing to say on the second level. And then on the third level, of course, the philosophical underpinnings of his argument are completely faulty. It's logically unsound. You don't make decisions about foreign policy based on whether or not you're contributing to the wish fulfillment of some bad actor who wishes you harm. So overall, just a really terrible, awful thing to say, and clearly designed, to provoke outrage, and I think, to seal with a kiss is I'm done with the Republican Party.
And so this to me kind of smacks of a career move for him, solidifying his place at MSNBC. I mean, not that we don't all do things to advance our careers, and that, you can't say something honestly and then also have it advance your career. I mean, these are not mutually exclusive things, but he's in his statement. And I have your piece up at PJ Media, and I'll put it all those streams on Facebook and YouTube and Periscope and all that, so people can read it. And it's a great piece. Caleb really takes apart this ridiculousness that he put out, and the video is also on there, so you can watch it for yourself. But there's a continuing pattern here, and the pattern is Trump does something liberals don't like. Sometimes Republicans don't like it either, but on the left, immediately the go-to now is Trump's a Nazi, Trump is Hitler, Trump knows where actual Hitler is and will appoint him to the next vacancy on the Supreme Court. Trump is somehow Nazi Hitler, Hitler Nazi, death camps, cattle cars, etc. And now they've advanced that to anyone who supports him or works for him is also Hitler Nazi, racist, white supremacist, etc.
Right. And not allowed to have dinner.
Oh yeah, no dinner for you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's like he wanted to jump on the let's call everybody DSS bandwagon, but he wanted to do a slight odd variation. The argument he's making is one that I've heard many times. I used to hear it all the time under Obama, which is, we have people in this country who thinks that you have to craft your foreign policy and your position in the world based on how other people are going to react to it, as opposed to what's in your best interest, to the extreme that we will do something against our interests as a nation, against our own citizens' interests, in order to satisfy the desire not to fulfill the wish or provoke the outrage of some bad outside actor. We see this constantly, the appeasement of foreign interests in American politics. I really find it terrible, but what's funny to me also is it is, and I know this may alienate some people in the audience, but it is also the kind of argument that I heard a lot during the Republican primaries, which was when someone would oppose Trump, someone like Steve Schmidt, for example, you would see a lot of people who were fans of President Trump, of then candidate Trump, say to Eric Erickson, for example, you're trying to get pats on the head from liberals. You're trying to do something. They're never going to like you. They're never going to give you credit for being fair-minded, so there's no point in doing it. And it's really kind of the same philosophy to me, which is that you should decide what's right based on how other people are going to react to it, instead of just basing it on whether or not what you're doing is right.
So I'm hoping people aren't getting mad by that, because what I enjoy is when I can actually have a conversation surrounding whether it's a policy or supporting a candidate or what have you, that doesn't involve me being demonized or name called for holding my views. And so I never bought into that. I never bought into the idea that people just wanted to get validation. People who had been solidly on the right previously now wanted validation from the left, and that's why they were attacking then candidate Trump. I always took it to be that they didn't really want him to be the president. They preferred someone else. I was actually myself.
I mean, a lot of it was especially that. It was a contentious primary. And a big part of it was just everybody had their own candidate.
There were so many.
Some people don't remember, but it was this way before. It was that way in 2008.
It was.
The war between the various GOP candidates who were trying to become the nominee was pretty severe.
It was. And we see it now. Like, if you're anywhere in America right now, there's a primary going on where you are for something. And it could be for attorney general, or it could be for the Senate races, whatever. And people have their candidates. And I've seen some of the most interesting behavior, which I always forget. Like, it's almost like how the pain of childbirth. Once you've had the baby, you forget until the next one. You're like, ooh, I forgot how horrible this was. I'm glad I'm getting a baby out of it, because I want this to stop. The primary is like that. I always forget how horrible it is until the next one, and someone I know is either like looning out and literally making me feel like I hate you, or they're doing things that I'm like, I've never seen you behave this way before, and they're like, it's the primary.
That's right.
That's like a justification.
It really boggles your mind sometimes. So I've been writing about politics for about 14 years, 10 years on the front page at Red State, and that was a community website, which means, we had a dedicated user base that could comment. You had to be a member, and then they could also submit diaries. So everybody knew everybody's name, and we always dreaded the approaching primary season because all these people who were friends arguing about policy and George Bush or Barack Obama are suddenly at each other's throats because one of them likes, candidate X and the other one likes candidate Y.
Yeah, my hope is that, so as we watch the left continue down a path that not only is un-American, but is untenable, the vilification of people in their private public spaces outside of where they work. And that idea has caught hold, and now you have hardcore leftist activists like Linda Sarsour and others criticizing Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer for finally once in their lives doing the right thing and denouncing Maxine Waters. And as we see that, this is a part of our culture that is being radicalized to a point that harkens back to the 70s when Bernadine Dorn and Ayers were out setting bombs, 2,000 bombs in that decade across America, and all of it driven by political differences. And so domestic terrorism, that's what we're pushing towards. And this is a country that we always have, however rancorous our language may be, we were always peaceful. When we change power, no one dies. There are never any coups. We just agree to be governed by people we think are actual nincompoops for 4 or 2 years or 6 years or however many times. Then we try to win the next time. So, I'm wondering what you feel like, especially with someone like Schmidt, someone that, I would have said was a respectable, clear-thinking individual. Where do you see this going?
Well, I'll tell you, you've used the exact right word. It's untenable. You have to be able to divorce yourself from the emotion of being irritated with the other person and realize that what's happening right now can't be sustained no matter how you feel about the other person. It just can't be sustained. Even back starting in 1968, which, by the way, the leftist movement wants to recreate. That was actually the name of their protest movement in 2008. It was Recreate 68. Starting back in 1968 up through 1980 until, God bless America, Ronald Reagan came around. Even then, it couldn't be sustained. It's an impossible thing to indefinitely maintain a society where people are 100% committed to being at each other's throats, not just rhetorically, but in actual fact. Confronting people at their homes, confronting people at restaurants, separate dining, separate schools, separate media, separate everything. You can't maintain that forever. It can't be done. So it is untenable.
I'm so glad you said that, because I'm looking for someone, out there to acknowledge that level of outrage, it's the kind of outrage level that if you maintain it, you get PTSD or you get ulcers or you get cancer or you have a heart attack. Like, we just can't all be that mad all the time.
Right. Yeah, it can't be done. I mean, as an individual person and as groups of people, and the disinterested, then, they get fatigued from this sort of thing, and they lose interest in the political process. Bad decisions are made as a consequence of the average American losing interest in the political process. Faith is lost in the institutions of the United States, the things that we rely on to provide for our defense, our criminal justice system, the things that we rely on to protect our rights, to enforce the Constitution. These are all institutions that we should have confidence in. Once you lose confidence in the political system entirely, you lose confidence in every other facet of government. And as much as it is a conservative impulse to distrust the actors in government and to hope for a small government to limit the consequences of bad decisions, you also have to have the confidence that America operates and functions as a unit that works, as a machine that is functioning. And once you stop believing that, once you start believing that it's all over and war is inevitable and we're just going to tear each other apart, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, and the other part of it that doesn't make any sense to me is that the people who are advocating for attacking and group mobbing individuals are the ones who don't believe in guns, and they're advocating for mobbing and attacking people in public who do believe in carrying guns. So,
that's right.
It's ridiculous.
Because what they have is a rationale in them that says that what they're doing is virtuous by nature of the reason for which they're doing it. They don't attach any significant moral implications to the action itself, but only to the thing upon which that action is being taken, the premise upon which you're taking the action. So it's not that harassing someone is wrong in and of itself. It's wrong if you're harassing the wrong person. That is likewise a totally untenable position, because eventually, even within that movement, they'll come to disagree about who is and who is not fair game.
I think they're already at that point, and you know, that seems the only thing that seems to calm them down is when innocents are killed or injured, such as Steve Scalia and the other Republicans on that baseball field last year, or the 5 officers who were gunned down by sniper fire during the Black Lives Matter protests, or the numerous individuals whose names have never been lifted up to national media who've been injured in these horrible Antifa riots. It seems like they need to see some blood before they realize, whoa, I think we've gone too far.
Right. Well, I think part of what's going on there is we've been lucky enough to have people who've been around longer and saw the consequences of action in the 60s and 70s and are able to be what Chuck Schumer was, which is someone who can say across the aisle, wait, slow down, let's not do that. But the problem is when they're not there to rein in people like Linda Sarsour anymore, then what happens?
Oh, I don't know, but I'm certainly glad you're out there now over at Media Eye, which is, you know, so to speak, the enemy territory, but you're holding your own over there. I read your pieces all the time over there. So congratulations on landing well after Red State. And thank you so much for taking time out. I know you're busy to join in the program today. I put the link up. I'll tweet it out.
I appreciate it. I've always been a big fan of yours.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on, and I hope to have you back again soon to talk more. I love it when someone can critically speak about, you know, the president is hugely popular on the right, hugely unpopular on the left, and you inhabit a kind of middle ground where you're not a fan, but you're not, you know, Trump derangement syndrome. And that's a fascinating position. Thank you, Caleb, for your time today.
Sure.
All right. Talk to you again soon. That's the music. That's hour 1. We're back with hour 2 right after this. Stay there.
Urban Family Talk.
Hey, I'm Miki, co-host of Aaron the Addisons on Urban Family Talk. I want to invite you to be part of our online chat community we've affectionately called The Churbin. While you listen to your favorite programs, you have the opportunity to communicate in real time with the hosts of those programs and other Urban Family listeners. Find out what the talk is all about. Become a Churbinite at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy is retiring at the end of July. The Reagan appointee made it known today after the final rounds of opinions from the High Court. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made these remarks from the Senate floor.
Thus far, President Trump's judicial nominations have reflected a keen understanding of the vital role that judges play in our constitutional order. Judges must interpret the law fairly and apply it even-handedly. Judicial decisions must not flow from judges' personal philosophies or preferences, but from an honest assessment of the words and actual meaning of the law. This bedrock principle has clearly defined the President's excellent choices to date. So we'll look forward to yet another outstanding selection, but today the Senate and the nation thank Justice Kennedy for his years of service on the bench and for his many contributions to jurisprudence and to our nation.
Now, not every member of the Republican Party sees eye to eye at the moment. Based on that, our Steve Jordahl saw it comment from AFA legal counsel Abraham Hamilton III. to see whether Republicans will come together and confirm another Supreme Court nominee.
Do Republicans have, on this issue, unity enough to get that pulled through?
I think so. They were able to confirm Justice Neil Gorsuch. I believe that same unity that they had with Justice Neil Gorsuch, I can't see why they wouldn't have that same unity for another appointment.
More coverage next hour. You can also stay up to speed on our website, onenewsnow.com. The Supreme Court has ruled in favor of public workers in Janus versus American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Plaintiff attorney Jacob Hubert spoke outside of the court following the decision, saying it will now be the job of the union to get support from a worker.
It's pro-worker. Unions can still represent workers and advocate for the things they believe in. The only thing that's changed is that workers will now have a choice, and that means that unions will have to earn workers' support instead of taking it for granted.
The ruling overturns a decades-old precedent in collective bargaining groups for several states, ruling that so-called fair share fees may not be taken from those who are not members of a union. The justices also said that employees must give consent to pay union fees rather than having them removed from paychecks automatically. Mark Janus sued the state of Illinois and the union to protect his First Amendment rights to choose for himself.
It's up to the worker to decide what they want for themselves, not some other larger entity. And it's not anything unusual than what we do in our daily lives as we go about our daily lives.
The union claimed it is required by law to represent and negotiate on behalf of all public sector workers, members, and non-members alike. A North Carolina man has admitted to impersonating a 3-star Army general and landing a chartered helicopter at a technology company to impress a woman. Kristen DeGroy pleaded guilty to one count of pretending to be a military officer. The 58-year-old faces up to 3 years in prison and is sentencing scheduled for late July. Defense attorneys say sentencing guidelines call for him to be sentenced to no more than 6 months incarceration, but authorities say DeGroy unexpectedly had a charter helicopter pilot land on a soccer field last November at the sprawling corporate campus of SAS Institute in Cary. Federal agents say that DeGroy was wearing a uniform when he told a security officer he was there to pick up a female employee for a classified briefing authorized by the president. In final news this hour, Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin said she respects voters' wishes, but is concerned that Tuesday's approval of medical marijuana in the state opens the door for recreational use. Voters easily approved a measure allowing cannabis to be used as medicine in the traditionally conservative Oklahoma. The term-limited Republican governor said she and other state officials are responsible for public health and safety, and that they will work to determine how to add proper regulatory framework for medical marijuana.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
There's one more thing I want to say, and I want to add to what Steve said about Congresswoman Waters. There's no place for this. She obviously should apologize. When we in this democracy are suggesting that because we disagree with people on political views, on policy views, on philosophical views, that we should resort to violence and harassment and intimidation, that's dangerous for our society. It's dangerous for our democracy. She should apologize, and there's just no place for that in our public discourse.
And that was Paul Ryan, and he was giving a press conference for a number of other things, and a number of other members stood up and spoke, and he closed it out with that comment, which is well shared. I wish he'd come out immediately as soon as she said it, but good enough. So when I talked to you about these 1970s-style bombings, and welcome back to the show. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Great to be with you. It's Hump Day. This is hour 2. We have Carmine Sabia coming up next segment. He's going to talk to us about current events, which all current events lead back to what happens with this Supreme Court appointment. They actually have Peter Strzok on Capitol Hill today. He is appearing for a closed-door interview. I wish I could be a fly on the wall in that room. And then, of course, there's a statement from Senator Mitch McConnell. The Senate stands ready to fulfill its constitutional role by offering advice and consent on President Trump's nominee to fill this vacancy. We will vote to confirm Justice Kennedy's successor this fall. McConnell issued a veiled warning to Democrats who are likely to throw up as many obstacles as they can find to prevent the court from further swinging to the right. It's imperative, this is Mitch McConnell, that the president's nominee be considered fairly and not subjected to personal attacks. Whoa. I hope he's ready to throw down. If you want to see somebody throw down, by the way, I didn't save the audio because it was rough outdoor audio live on the scene of some group of protesters, some activists at Georgetown University. Mitch McConnell and his wife, Elaine Chao, who's the transportation secretary, were leaving an event on the campus. They had their big black, government issue Escalade parked there, 2 Secret Service agents escorting them out. Mitch McConnell went to enter the vehicle and his wife went around the back to enter on the driver's side. And a group of men, I think 5 men, a couple with cameras, one with a boom to get the audio. They walk up and they said, "Why are you separating children and families at the border? Huh? Why are you separating children and families at the border?" Mitch McConnell got into the vehicle. They shut the door behind him. And then the agent went around the back where the men crushed up against the back of the vehicle and Elaine Chao wasn't able to get around the back. She said, "Are you going to let me through?" And they started asking the question repeatedly. And she said, "Leave my husband alone." And then she got right in their faces and smiled and said, "Are you going to let me around the back of this building? Or are you going to prevent me from entering this vehicle?" They start yelling. These grown men, they're clearly like a foot or more taller than she is. And she was like, are you going to let me around the back of this vehicle and leave my husband alone? Leave my husband alone. I mean, she wasn't even slightly intimidated. And the Secret Service agents were 2 very small women. I mean, they were so small. I just would have been like, this isn't going to do it for me. But anyway, she goes to get in the vehicle. She puts one foot in. And as she lowers her head to kind of duck into the back of the car, she sticks her finger out and looks right at him and smiles and then gets in the vehicle. Apparently, she's not intimidated by big, burly, angry protesters. I'm telling you. So this is where are we going with this? 1970 style bombings, according to an author over at a conservative website. It's what we need to be expecting. And this writer is trying to put us in the mind of what we should be looking for and what we should expect. So we can't expect that, even though we keep saying this is the wrong behavior, and even people in leadership like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are saying don't do this, we can't expect that that's what's going to happen. This is by Art Moore. He's the co-author of the best-selling book, See Something, Say Nothing. And he's talking about the 1970s. So he's quoting Splinter senior writer Hamilton Nolan. Now, Splinter is a website. It's hard on the left. It's an activist type of a website. And this guy, who's the senior writer over there, says, "Do you think that being asked to leave a restaurant or having your meal interrupted or being called by the public is bad? My fascism enabling friends, this is only the beginning." He points to history. He says, in his piece, he says, thousands of domestic bombings per year were the norm in the 1970s. This is what happens when citizens decide en masse that their political system is corrupt, racist, and unresponsive. The people out of power have only just begun to flex their dissatisfaction. The day will come sooner than you all think when Trump administration officials will look back fondly at the time when all they had to worry about was getting hollered at a Mexican restaurant. He reasons that when you aggressively expletive with people's lives, you should not be surprised when they decide to expletive with yours. Splinter is a news and opinion website owned by the progressive Gizmodo Media Group, a division of Univision Communications. You surprised about that? Which is a Hispanic media giant. Splinter's direct owner, Fusion Media Group, was purchased from Disney in April of 2016. Fusion describes itself as Univision's multi-platform English language division dedicated to serving young, diverse America. Nolan writes an op-ed for the New York Times recently. He contends that the Trump administration officials should not be allowed to live their lives in peace and affluence while they inflict serious harms on large portions of America's population. There's so much wrong with that. Obviously, he's just ginning up hatred and hoping for the bombings and everything that he mentions. Not being able to go to restaurants and attend parties and be celebrated is just the minimum baseline here. The people who are pushing America merrily down the road to fascism and white nationalism are delusional if they do not think that the backlash is going to get much worse. He says that Trump's outrages include ripping families apart at the border, and he wants those costs to be shown immediately. He doesn't want anyone to forget that Trump is fighting against climate change, in other words, taking the religion of climate change apart, neutering the EPA, mainstreaming white nationalist ideas. Since when is he doing that? And he says the cost will be manifested for many decades to come. Now, according to the FBI, in 1971 and 1972 alone, there were more than 2,000 bombs planted throughout the United States by domestic terror groups. There was the Weather Underground, led by Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn, and their targets were the Pentagon and the U.S. Capitol. Now, according to these people, God is on their side. Now, I've told you about that. God not only hates violence, but he hates duplicity, and he hates people who lie and lead others astray. He hates it. So it doesn't matter if someone who's a radical or someone who wants you to believe what they believe claims to have a mandate from God to do that. It's your responsibility as the listener to test what they say and to make sure that what they're telling you is the truth before you join in. So if you end up going out and letting these hate-filled mongers rile you up to the point where you begin to engage in this kind of behavior and then you're arrested, don't expect, your local Christian organization or your church to come bail you out or for anyone to defend the deplorable behavior that is being instituted here. And this is not an accident. None of these things are happening in a vacuum apart from themselves. This is the plan. We couldn't win the election. They had guaranteed themselves. They basically lulled themselves into a stupor of complacency with the belief that they were going to win the election in 2016. And when it wasn't given to them, they then said, well, all we have to do is show how duplicitous Donald Trump is. We just listen to him, wiretap him, get into his emails. We'll get him. He's dirty. We'll get rid of him. Well, how's that working out for you? It's not. It's not working out. And that's why you see them escalating and ramping up. Finding any little thing, something that was going on during the Obama administration and the Bush administration and the Clinton administration. Now, all of a sudden, it's a capital case. Now, all of a sudden, Linda Sarsour sees kids at the airport. Where was she seeing them before? These kids have been getting bussed all over the country and flown all over the country for the past 30 years. But she's just now seeing them at the airport. So I talked to you a little bit about this young woman, 28 years old, who just unseated one of the biggest Trump haters in the Congress, Congressman Joe Crowley. He was expected to take Nancy Pelosi's place, but now he won't be able to do it because he has summarily been ousted from his position by this young woman. Her name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, Donald Trump's taking credit for the earthquake that unseated this guy. He's already tweeted a very, very in-your-face kind of nanny boo-boo tweet from Donald Trump. But Crowley was supposed to be Pelosi's successor. Now, here's what's important about this. And I alluded to this in hour one about the importance of us understanding how this, it seems like it's this weird, like, how could that be happening? Why is Linda Sarsour criticizing Chuck Schumer? Why do we see so many people saying mean things about Nancy Pelosi? What's the problem? For those of us who are normal, we see Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer for what they are. They're hard on the left. They're hard on the left of American politics. But if you've come here from Guatemala or some other third world, society where every 2 years or so there's a coup and the drug lord is just as prominent in your country as, the president or prime minister or whatever you've got, then all this talk about peaceful elections and, we'll get them the next time. We didn't win in 2016. We have 2020. That's not good enough for you. You need a little revolution. You're looking for something a little bit, tangier than what we Americans are used to. We've had peaceful transitions of power for the entirety of our country's history, with the exception of when we took this country from Great Britain. That was pretty violent. We had to rip it out of their hands and then send them packing with their little red jackets. And you know I love a really nice red jacket. But they had to go. And other countries just aren't used to that, especially South American countries. So we're bringing all of these South Americans in here. Are we surprised that they would want to elect someone to represent them in Congress who will bring them some revolution, the kind of revolution they're used to? But this isn't something that was brought about by Republicans by themselves. The Republicans have been complicit in the immigration problem in this country, but they've been led by the nose by the Democrats. So you've got the Democratic Socialists of America. That's the party she belongs to. She's not a Democrat. She's a Democratic Socialist person. She took down one of the most powerful institutional Democrats in Congress. She ran an uncompromising campaign based on militant principles, including abolishing ICE. That's Jeremy Scahill. He tweeted that out today. After today's primary, 28-year-old Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is most certain to become the first member of a socialist organization to be elected in Congress in 90 years and the fourth open socialist ever elected to Congress in U.S. history. Socialism is spelled Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Congratulations to my Dem socialist comrade, my Latinx millennial sister, Ocasio 2018, on tonight's historic primary win. Si se puede, si se pudo. Palante to a government for the many, not for the few. How did this happen? And why, if you're a Democrat, what are you going to do about it? You can't do anything about that particular instance because this woman has just been given the nomination. And from that, she will win the seat because there is no viable Republican challenger for the heavily Democratic district that she hails from. So now that we know she'll be in Congress, what does this mean? Well, in the short term, it means good things for Republicans and for Donald Trump because she's going to say things that make people who support her look like people from a third world country. But what about what it speaks to when it comes to the plight of, say, I don't know, blacks who live in the district where she comes from? She may give lip service that she wants universal health care for all. She wants to eradicate poverty in this country, all utopian ideals. You notice how Democrats always talk about stuff that is literally impossible. If we can't insure 15% of Americans who don't have insurance, how are we going to eradicate poverty in its entirety? We've been fighting the war on poverty for 100 years. It just keeps getting worse. The further away from capitalism we get, the worse it gets. But she doesn't care about that. She won't be required to deliver any results. It will be the campaign slogans. It will be the youthfulness of her demeanor. It will be the historicity of her campaign. When people are left behind and inevitably wake up in the morning after she's served her first term and she's asking for re-election and they don't see any difference, any material difference in their circumstances that they can attribute to her, they'll blame Republicans. They'll blame Donald Trump. But the truth is, this is the Democrats reaping what they've sown. The fact that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer's base is now eating them alive, literally ripping them limb from limb and moving them out of the way and replacing them with hardcore socialists is exactly what happens when you spend 30, 40 years teaching American children that America is the devil, that socialism is good. Eventually, those kids are going to grow up and vote you out. That's what's happening to the Democrats. Sure, it sounds satisfying, but what does it mean for America? Not good. It's not good at all. All right, when we get back, we will have Carmine Sabia with us here on the show. Stay there.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for a health care plan, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called Medi-Share. Medi-Share is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, Medi-Share members have shared more than $2.5 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with Medi-Share. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings may be less or more, but Think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. Just hit **345. That's **345, **345.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Mention celebrity suicides and you immediately think of Robin Williams, Anthony Bourdain, and Kate Spade. Talk about teen suicides and you think of the lost potential of young people. After all, it is the third leading cause of death among 10 to 24-year-olds. Every day, at least 123 Americans die of suicide. It is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. Depression is one reason, a psychological disorder that affects nearly a fourth of American adults in a given year. And only half of all Americans experiencing an episode of major depression receive treatment. It is also true that more than half of those who commit suicide had no history of mental health problems. Troubled relationships, substance abuse, health issues, and financial woes are some of the other challenges that contribute to suicide. Sociologists document that people are more isolated than ever before. On the other hand, we may be more connected virtually through social media, but that's not the same as face-to-face interaction and friendships. Families, churches, and social groups can provide an answer to the suicide epidemic. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." We should take comfort in that verse, but also be the hands and feet of Jesus to reach out to those who are crushed and brokenhearted. Parents also have an important role to play. Asking your child about suicide does not cause suicidal behavior, but can provide a caring and empathetic conversation that might save his or her life. They should look for warning signs. One study found that 4 out of 5 teen suicides were preceded by clear warning signs. We're living in the midst of a suicide epidemic. That is why each of us should be watching for any cry for help and attention. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back. Thanks for being here with us today at Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram, stacyontheright.com for the newsletter, and also for my columns and other cool stuff that you can watch if you're interested in doing that. It's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program, Carmine Sabia. He's a junior, who's a Christian conservative political pundit, radio host, and editor. Carmine, thanks for joining in today.
Hey, Stacy, thank you for having me.
Hey, I'm excited to talk to you because it's Justice Anthony Kennedy's retiring day.
Oh, it's a party today.
I'm feeling a little happy.
It's a great day to be a conservative. You know, I get up in the morning, go over, I'm about to start my writing, and all of a sudden, I get a big, fat Christmas present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you were excited.
Wade is on the ropes.
I'm telling you, I thought about that too, but rather than count my chickens before I even can see eggs or a coop, I thought it would be awesome for you and I to discuss, because I know this is right in your wheelhouse. I want to kind of go back and refresh the listeners on this list. So remember, this list has existed since before Donald Trump was actually the president. It was created in part by Heritage and some other really conservative organizations where they felt like they wanted to offer a kind of a hand up to the president incoming, who they thought, whoever the president coming in is, we want to make sure they have our opinion on who would make great justices. And it's quite a list. I mean, Keith Blackwell, Allison Ide of Colorado, just Mike Lee of Utah.
That's my pick.
Yeah. Diane Sykes of Wisconsin. Who else? Who else on here do you feel like would be great? I mean, they all look like really good people, honestly. But there has to be someone.
You really can't go wrong. It's kind of like, fling a dart over your shoulder.
Uh-oh.
You know what I mean?
Oh, there you are.
Fling a dart over your shoulder, and you're going to hit a winner. For me, though, Mike Lee is my guy.
Okay.
Like, I saw Ben Shapiro put out something that he should be on the list.
Ben Shapiro? No, my children will not permit that. No, my kids would never go for that because they love his podcast.
No, of course not.
Yeah. Oh, the millennials of today would rise up in angst. No, he can't. He has to stay right there behind the microphone and behind the television screen. for the videos and the content that he produces.
Britt Grant a hard look, I think. Kavanaugh's got to get a hard look.
What about, I know this sounds a little crazy and maybe it's too soon, but I want Ted Cruz to go on the Supreme Court.
I knew you were going to say that.
You knew it. Well, am I right?
I knew you were going to say that. I thought it too, but the president said he's going to stick to the list.
Okay.
I would love Ted Cruz myself. I mean, if I had to pick anybody, I would pick Senator Ted Cruz. But he said he's going to stick to the list. I have a feeling he will.
All right. So, and this is also the list that Neil Gorsuch came from, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a good
he added
list.
5 names after the election, but it's the same list. Yeah.
All right, so we've got that. I think that coupled with the statement from Mitch McConnell's office, they were very swift to put out word today saying that the nomination will occur this fall. They're not going to, delay anything. I'm really glad to hear that. They're also working through August.
Like to give conservatives when they tell you, hey, how come Senator McConnell said, let's wait for an election, but now he doesn't have to? Well, a presidential election and a congressional election, I mean, is very different because the way the House of Representatives works, I mean, you're always in election season, so then you could never nominate a Supreme Court justice. Well, the House has there's elections every 2 years. So
there are. So
if you go by that logic, you could never nominate a Supreme Court justice.
That's true.
Senator McConnell was specifically referring to presidential elections. So when Democrats say, well, the people deserve a say in the Supreme Court, they had one last year. They knew a seat was on the line, and this was a vote they made. So don't tell me now people need a say. They had their say.
Yeah, you know what, Carmine? I don't really care what people say about what happened with Merrick Garland. It's in the past, and whenever we would bring up things that Hillary Clinton did that were in the past but were still relevant because they were under investigation, we were told, sit down, be quiet, those are in the past. Well, the Merrick Garland nomination actually is in the past because the seat that he was going to occupy has been occupied by Neil Gorsuch, and the person who was supposed to put him there is no longer the president, and the person who was supposed to succeed that person didn't win the presidency. So not only is it in the past, it's like so behind us, and it really is a distraction away from the true issue, which is, you talked about Roe v. Wade. We've just had some really consequential decisions come down on a 5-4 basis where Neil Gorsuch is doing what we hoped he would do when his name appeared on that list. He's solidly on the
favorite number.
Yes, 5-4, 5-4, 5-4. It keeps coming back, 5-4. And Justice Anthony Kennedy has been, he likes to swing around. This past couple of days, he's been right there, at the right spot, which is interesting with his announcement from today.
Yeah, I thought that too. I thought this really signaled something. And the announcement today, I think, signals, hey, look, I may be a swing vote, but I'm making sure that I stick to my Republican principles, and I'm making sure a Republican gets on this court. And I think that's what he said with his retirement today is that, hey, look, I'm not going to be replaced by a Democrat. I'm just, there's things I disagree with President Trump on. I'm speaking for him now. Yeah, there's things I disagree with President Trump on, but I'm not getting replaced by Kamala Harris.
So let's talk a little bit about, there's been this big, huge story. I've been covering it every day, and it is the new tactic of the left, which is no person who supports Donald Trump, whether they're an administration official or just a Trump supporter in a hat, should be allowed in public spaces. And a number of Democrats have come out and said that's not American, but a number of them are holding their ground. You have Sonny Hostin over at The View, who was the lone person on the panel to defend this behavior. You have...
I was shocked at that.
Yeah.
I was shocked that Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar actually took the other side of that debate.
I was too. In fact, I was sitting there, you watch the clip. So I wasn't watching it on TV. I was watching on my laptop. I had my little cup of coffee. And Joy Behar starts talking about, I don't agree with that. I don't like the way people treat me in public. And I just think people should leave people alone when they're in public trying to go about their business. And Whoopi Goldberg said she gets accosted in groups where she literally has experienced this and she was totally against it. And so I'm sitting there thinking, are pigs about to fly through my window? These two, I agree with these two. And then Sonny Hostin, who can often be somewhat reasonable, comes out as the one who thinks this is okay. I was really surprised.
Yeah, I was surprised at that too, because I thought Hostin would have been more reasonable than that. But it just shows how divided we are right now, right?
It does. It does. It's very sad.
So divided, but I think it's a horrible thing. I think it's a horrible thing. I wouldn't want Republicans doing it to liberals.
No, I wouldn't. I would not. I absolutely would not support that. So, for those who think, well, she's just outraged because it's Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Yeah, I'm a Sarah Huckabee Sanders fan. I ain't going to lie. But it's not because it's her. It's because that kind of behavior in public. First of all, if you've ever been in public and seen someone like kind of have an outburst and then other people respond to it, it is so disconcerting because you're not used to it. None of us are used to it. That's not the kind of place where we live. When you experience it, it leaves you shaken all day. I remember it happening at an airport where we were all around the baggage claim, and a lady told I guess they were arguing over the space. Everyone is rushing forward trying to get their bag. She says, you're only treating me this way because I'm black. You're a racist. And a bunch of people erupted and said, wow, you can't call him a racist just because he bumped into you with your bag. Everyone was yelling at once. And the person who said it, she immediately kind of shrunk down like, oh my gosh, they're going to hit me. And she grabbed her bag and got out of there. And people kept arguing and talking amongst themselves. And it was loud. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, so that lady who just said that, she must have really felt like terrible. Why did she say that? I missed what happened. All I wanted to do is get my bag and get as far away from there as I could because I was really on the outside of it. I couldn't even see what the original problem was. But everyone was so angry, and you can feel that anger rise up when it's a group of people, and all the emotions are running high, and that wasn't even directed at me. So, I don't think people really understand what this looks like if everyone's going to confront people that are Trump supporters all the time in public spaces like gas stations and stuff. That looks like a mob all the time.
And it's super scary to have that in your face.
It is. So
we've got to be better as people about that, I think.
We do. We have to be better than that, and we have to be understanding of the fact that no matter how much we disagree, we still all have the right to be in public. So I want to kind of go back a little ways. There's some new audio that's out of Roseanne Barr, and it's a podcast she did about a month ago. But, no, she's in this one, she's being interviewed by America's Rabbi, Rabbi Shmuley, and they're good friends. They've been friends for decades. And apparently in the interview, she breaks down and she talks about how sorry she is, and she doesn't want anyone to defend her, but she's really seeking forgiveness. And I'm wondering if in some ways we've lost the art of letting someone after they've apologized, letting them off the hook. In other words, you've apologized, you can be a regular person again instead of just leaving her up for public shame and humiliation for the rest of her life.
Well, I think we did. I think there's this thing where people on the other side, whether it be a liberal or whether it be a conservative or a progressive, there's this desire to not just defeat somebody, but to destroy somebody. I've heard people say things to me about Senator Schumer or Representative Maxine Waters that they actually want to kill them. And I don't like that. That scares the heck out of me. I want no harm to come to these people. I want to defeat them on the battlefield of ideas, but I want them to live their life happy and healthy.
Yeah, me too.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I actually
think we've gotten to a point where people don't want that. I disagree with Senator Schumer. I want to destroy him. And I personally, and I know people on the right get angry at me sometimes when I will step in. Like if somebody will put fake news out, like there was a picture about Representative Maxine Waters the other day that she said something about high tide and low tide was proof of global warming, which is fake news, and I call it out. And people get angry at me. Why are you calling it out? Because why are you doing that? That's stupid.
I'm not gonna get sucked in. High tide and low tide. I'm not gonna get sucked in. I won't do it.
It's fake, though.
Oh, okay. Well,
she didn't really say that.
Oh gosh. Yeah. My thing with all of it is there's so much that a lot of these elected officials and public people say that what they've said, we don't have to do any conspiracy theory.
Correct.
We don't have to attack their looks. We can just go with what they've said, and it's more than enough.
I mean, between Vice President Joe Biden and Representative Barbara Lee, it's a treasure trove of quotes.
It is. I mean, just unbelievable amount of quotes. So you said you get up in the morning and you go to write, and then there's all this breaking news. What are you writing about today? What's hot on the ticket for today?
Well, I'm writing about the Supreme Court now.
Absolutely.
I was writing about civility before that, but
yeah.
I think the Supreme Court kind of takes precedence right now. There's a lot. Listen, affirmative action is on the line. Gay marriage, by the way, is not on the line for people that are talking about it. That's done.
Yeah.
That's settled law. That's not going to be, because Justice Gorsuch pretty much said as much. So you're not going to have that on the line. But, Roe versus Wade is on the line. Affirmative action is on the line. I'll tell you, one of the things I was going to write about today is I found it interesting after the decision came out today that the Democrat Party is legitimately trying to make a case about forcing people to pay dues to an organization they might not want to belong to. And somehow that's part of democracy. I thought, I just reading the hot takes on that and trying to figure out how are they making this case was rather interesting this morning. It's been a banner week for the Supreme Court. It just got better. I'm very excited, as you can tell today. I'm very excited.
Yeah. So, Carmine, what else is there, though? We have just about a minute left. Are there any more decisions? Because I know we're getting close to the end of the period where they announce their decisions.
I believe it's done now. I believe they're done. That's why he announced his retirement today.
Okay. So that's it. I feel that there's a sense of anticipation now, because I really feel like we're going to get, there's somebody out there, how we have so many people who they have their area of specialty. Carmine, there's somebody out there right now who's doing the top 5 picks, and they're going to have breakdowns. And how for people in sports, they want to know everything about the different sports people and the different quarterbacks. Well, this is that for me. I want to know everything about these justices, their body of work, their precedents, all the decisions they've made. I am so interested in this, and it's going to really be great to talk about it on the show as well. And I'll be looking out for your pieces, reading what you've written about it. I wanted to say thanks for coming on today. It's always such a pleasure to speak with you. Carmine Sabia Jr., Christian conservative political pundit, radio host, editor extraordinaire, and guest of the show all the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stacey. Take care.
All right. Talk to you again soon. I love it when we have people on who talk about almost anything, and he certainly can with his writing. He's always writing about topics. I have to say, I am excited about that. I wasn't kidding when I said this is kind of like, I forget what you guys call it, because I'm not into sports, but you guys have these rundowns, like people who like football and hockey and stuff. Y'all have when one person's getting traded, you'll have all of the top picks, and then y'all will look at that. That's what this is like. This is like the top 25 picks. Let me pull my little list back up, you guys. Where did I have that list? I just opened it up. The list of 25 people. Here it is. I will put this link into the live streams and on the Facebook page. If you're listening on terrestrial radio, thank you so much. And definitely check the Facebook page for this list. It's on the Washington Examiner. It's a piece by Naomi Lim from June 27, 2018. She's just put this list up. Here's who may replace Kennedy on the Supreme Court bench after his retirement goes into effect on July 31st. Oh my goodness, he literally just retired, and it goes into effect in just a few days. This is amazing. I want to point out a couple of people who are on here. You've got for the state of Missouri. So the list of potentials, they're from all over the country. From Missouri, he's on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit. His name is Raymond Grunder. And I want to highlight a couple more. We mentioned Mike Lee of Utah, Thomas Lee of Utah. He's on the Supreme Court of Utah. And Kevin Newsom of Alabama. He's on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. Don Willett of Texas. He's on the Supreme Court of Texas. Okay, I'm split now. I'm split. I think I'm rooting for Don Willett. He's the one I'm rooting for. Check him out on Twitter if you want to see what I'm talking about. All right, that's the music. We'll be back with more Stacey on the Right after this. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Slow down, moms. That sounds pretty counterintuitive, doesn't it? Haven't we all wished to work faster, smarter, and better? But that isn't what God has for us. We have been given life to enjoy abundantly, which means that we must prune our activities for our own sanity. As American culture moves at an ever-increasing speed, God calls moms to slow down and say no sometimes. Not only is there power in doing so, there is relief, because we must use our time wisely. We often feel the pressure to say yes because we don't want other parents to question our fitness. This fear leads to overscheduling and stress. Isaiah chapter 8 verse 13 says, "The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He is the one you are to fear." Pray about your family commitments and feel free to say no. God will bless you for it. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at stacyontheright.com.
We need you to call your senators today. Tell them to put an end to the liberals' filibuster, switch to a majority vote, and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference. Call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood.
Just as David's mighty man Benaiah chased down a lion into a pit on a snowy day, Lion Chasers champions uncommon men and women of faith who are unafraid to stand up and speak truth to power in these dark and evil days. Never before has there been such a need for people of faith to draw a line in the sand with a sword of truth. Lion Chasers, the intersection of faith and public policy with Lonnie Poindexter. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
I come to steal, kill, and to destroy. You belong to me. Your soul, your mind, and your body. You chose death over life. You are mine, forever and ever and ever.
Hell is real. Matthew chapter 25 verse 46 says there will be those who will receive eternal punishment in hell, but the righteous will have eternal life in heaven with our Savior Jesus Christ. Which will you choose? Let's go deeper at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right.
You've been decrying President Trump's bigotry. Obviously, you used to follow somebody who continually expressed sexist, anti-LGBTQ, and anti-Semitic bigotry, Louis Farrakhan. You have condemned Farrakhan's bigotry.
But I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that, sir. But I'm sorry.
What are you disagreeing with?
That comes up in this context.
Well, you're decrying bigotry, and Louis Farrakhan is a pretty clear bigot.
Right, and I agree that that's true, and I think that I've made myself very clear. But look, that's going back to the false equivalency. You know, I don't have any support for what the individual you just mentioned stands for, nor do I agree with Trump's bigotry either. But that again, you know, anytime somebody tries to say that something is unfair and bigoted, if you're going to say, well, one time you sort of said something or somebody said you said something, and then so nobody
you were a follower of
bigotry.
Farrakhan. You were a follower of Farrakhan, sir.
No, I wasn't, Jake. I'm sorry. That's not true, Jake. But I just want to say to you, if anyone who raises concerns about bigotry then is put in a position to have to defend themselves, then we never get to talk about bigotry. And I hope that's not what your purpose is, Jake, because you've stood for an equal society. But if you're going to try to put me on the spot and have to explain myself, I didn't pass a Muslim ban.
Whew, it got a little bit frosty up in there with Keith Ellison. So we are going to listen to him continue to tap dance around. In fact, we skipped a little smidge of this audio clip because they were cross-talking each other. And I felt like Jake Tapper was really trying to bring it to Ellison and to call him on the carpet for his support of Louis Farrakhan and Louis Farrakhan's anti-women, anti-Semitic comments over the years. I mean, there's no question the guy has a problem in that area, and he's very bigoted. And he said some very, very incendiary things. It's crazy that Keith Ellison would be so closely associated with him. And of course, now he's distanced himself in the same way that former President Obama distanced himself from Reverend Wright. I mean, you know, it was just politically convenient to be with him when the networking and the connections were flowing. And then once he became much more national, it was much more convenient and beneficial to disconnect. But that shouldn't be enough for us. it's an indicator of some kind of major problem that the two were so closely affiliated. And he doesn't give a good reason for it. He could say, well, I practice Islam and he leads a huge contingent of, people who practice the same faith as me in this country. And while I disagree with this or that, the reason that I was affiliated with him, that I attended events where he spoke, is because I wanted to speak to his constituency. I would respect that as a viable opinion as to why a justification for his behavior. You can't change the behavior. What Keith Ellison seeks to do here is to erase the behavior and act as if it never happened. And Jake Tapper wasn't really having it. It's number 2.
The Washington Post fact checker in March gave you 4 Pinocchios for your claim that you have no relationship with him. And I want you to take a listen to Farrakhan talking in an interview about how you only...
That's not true.
And Farrakhan, the Washington Post fact checker did give you 4 Pinocchios about that. That's just true.
Jake, they were wrong. Jake,
they were
Jake,
wrong.
I have not... It's untrue, Jake. I'm sorry. And... I'm disappointed that that's why you called me on your show today.
I didn't.
Because
that's not why I called you on the show.
Court,
but yes,
Jake, the Supreme Court has ruled that the president's ban on Muslims and Muslim countries, and which started in his campaign rhetoric, that is okay. And now, Jake, you want me to have to justify myself based on facts that were not true and were always political.
How is it that they're facts, but they're not true? He should say based on statements that were untrue, but you know how it is when you're on live TV. I get that. So why? I don't think he should be allowed to get away with it. Sorry, I don't. There's pictures of the two of them hugging each other and spending time together, et cetera, et cetera. If he wants to distance himself from Farrakhan legitimately and completely, then he should do so by making a statement that actually makes sense to those of us who have eyeballs and can see, because YouTube is forever. That's really his only option here. He continues to go on television, and when he's asked about this, well, that's just not true. Well, you can say anything you want. You can say anything you want's not true, but what do we know? What do we see with our own eyes? It's ridiculous. So I mentioned during my interview with Carmine that there's this audio of Roseanne Barr, and Rabbi Shmuley then talked about the interview that he did with her, and there's this lack of willingness to forgive. And as Christians, we have to be reminded continually. I know I do. Full disclosure, I know I do have to be reminded that in order to be forgiven by my Father in heaven, I must forgive. And you know how it is when something takes root in you, when someone offends you or mistreats you or does something wrong to you. And the longer you go without forgiving, the deeper the roots of that unforgiveness latch onto you. And it is so hard to dig them out. If you're into gardening, you know what it's like to try to dig out weeds that have kind of gotten set in and they've been allowed to germinate for too long and they've been rained on for a while and they've sunk their roots deep down into the soil. And so you can pull them out, but if you don't get the whole root out, that root's just going to grow back up to the top and a new weed will be there within 7 days. And it's kind of like that with unforgiveness. And that's why God is so clear to us what we must do when we're wronged. I see a huge double standard here, but it doesn't mean that we can't still learn from what's happening. And my heart really goes out to Roseanne Barr because she's someone who has Black people in her family. She really has had close affiliations with Blacks for her entire career. She was one of the main people back in Hollywood, back in the day, where it was Black TV shows and Black families on one show and white families on another show, Italian families on another show. There was no mixture. She was one of the people who really liked mixing people up and showing what really has existed in our country since forever. Even during our most segregated times, people spent time during their day with people who weren't the same ethnic background as they were. It just is what it is. And so I want to listen to this audio from her, and then we'll go to the phones. I feel like she's broken and she deserves our forgiveness and she needs it. And if we have ever been forgiven in our lives, then we ought to know what this feels like and that we want her to have the same freedom to be forgiven and set free from this public vilification. It's number 8.
I horribly regret it. Are you kidding? I've lost everything. And I regretted it before I lost everything. And I said to God, I am willing to accept whatever consequences this brings because I know I've done wrong.
Joining us now, America's rabbi and longtime Roseanne Barr friend, Rabbi Shmuley Boteach. Thanks for being with us tonight, Rabbi.
Thank you for having me, Shannon.
She was obviously very emotional in this interview you had with her. She says she's lost everything. She sounded very remorseful, too, and said she knows that she's going to have a price to pay.
Well, a lot of people are commenting on the death of civility in America, but maybe more consequential is the death of forgiveness. Here you have a woman that is quite well known, prepared to show such extreme vulnerability, extreme anguish, emotional brokenness, almost begging to be forgiven for something that she acknowledges was a terrible error. And she has said it over and over and over again. And I think it's time that we just allowed her to make restitution and rectification for what she did, because we have to be a forgiving people. I mean, it was Martin Luther King, who she says is her idol in this podcast, who said that those who are bereft of forgiveness are also bereft of love, and we must be a much more forgiving nation.
Especially when she's getting a punishment that no one else is getting. You know, Jane Fonda's brother, his movie came out over the weekend, and he has not been suspended from Twitter for saying that the president's son should be kidnapped and put into a cage and then locked into a room with a bunch of pedophiles. He's not had any repercussions for saying that. Roseanne Barr has lost everything. They're writing her out of the show, and they're re-releasing it as The Connors. Good luck with that. Who's going to watch that? Like, who? Who is going to? I'm sorry. You guys know, there's so little on TV to watch that when there's something decent, I'm kind of like, okay, don't mess with it, because I need to have something. Let's go to the phones. We have Jerry from Ohio. Thanks for calling in to Stacey on the Right.
Wow, thanks for letting me be on the show, Stacey.
No problem.
I'm telling you, Roseanne Barr did nothing wrong. I looked at the picture of the character from Planet of the Apes. She was exactly right, and it was funny. And what frustrates me is Roseanne Barr has such a sensitive heart. She didn't know that blacks could ever be offended by something like that. And I don't even know the blacks were. I think some white producer at CNN made it out that blacks were offended. And I think Roseanne is a victim of the mainstream media.
Well, okay, so a couple things. So she since has admitted that she didn't know that Valerie Jarrett was black, which I knew, but that's because I looked into all of the cabinet members of the Obama administration, their histories and all of that. And so I did know that. Now, it is offensive to black people when anyone compares a black person to a monkey. It is very offensive. But I think you've also hit on one of the overarching themes here, which are, it really didn't matter what Roseanne Barr tweeted out in her off time when the show is on hiatus and not filming from her personal Twitter account. It didn't matter that she didn't know Valerie Jarrett was black. None of that mattered because she had to be taken out because she was successfully normalizing Trump voters and support of Donald Trump. And so this was an excuse to get rid of her. And we know that's true because of what happened with Peter Fonda last week. He has received no repercussions, and his suggestion on Twitter for the president's son to be kidnapped and fed to pedophiles is much worse than the comparison that was made against Valerie Jarrett. And so, it's a sad moment for us because it's the full fruition of the double standards that the mainstream media has put forward. We now see that they don't even have any shame in destroying the life of one person because they're a conservative while protecting someone else for doing something much, much worse. So, it's sad, and I hate it. I hate what's happening here. And she's really genuinely apologized, which we did not hear from Peter Fonda, and we're not going to hear from many of these other people who've made similar horrible comments. Thank you so much for calling the show today. So we have a few minutes left, and when I listened to that audio, I was like, man, when it's one thing when someone, we've all been through it, haven't we? Someone does something to you, and then they say, oh, I'm sorry if you felt like I offended you. What's that? It's not an apology. I'm sorry if you feel like that was the wrong thing for me to say. In other words, I'm fine with it, but you seem to have a problem. I'm sorry you have a problem. Those are not apologies. We've all had someone apologize to us like that. And the inclination within us is, I'm sorry, what? You're sorry that I'm upset that you did something wrong to me? You're not admitting that it's wrong? You're just, and so it's almost like taking something they maybe pricked you. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it was on purpose. And then instead of them apologizing and helping you find a Band-Aid, they come over and they're like, doesn't look like I made a big enough hole. And they slice you. Now it's open and you're like really ticked off and you're in pain. Then they're like, now there's something for you to be upset about. Still not sorry though. Moving on. And they go on about their lives and they never think about it again. Meanwhile, you're eaten up and riddled with anger and recrimination and you're definitely not happy with them. And the answer is to forgive and let go. And so I feel terrible for Roseanne because she was taken, her comment was misconstrued. Other people have made much worse comments and not had them misconstrued. She's lost a lot and she's genuinely sorry. And so there's a huge difference in her behavior than the behavior of other people. She genuinely wouldn't have sent the tweet out if she'd known it would upset people. Peter Fonda will offend again. He definitely will. He's received no repercussions. And so it's so sad to me that this is going on for her. But I do see it as a lesson for all of us. First of all, we should pray for Roseanne that she will come to a place of peace and have a second chance at reviving her career or doing something different that will be ultimately successful, because she really has been successful in Hollywood at acting and at being herself. And for the rest of us who were observing this, for us to remember to forgive. And even if we haven't been asked, that's my number one, y'all. This is like so real. I hate it when someone has done something and they know I'm upset about it and they know they've done something wrong. And instead of apologizing, they just push forward and expect to still be in close communication and act as if nothing has happened. And then if you bring it up and say, are you not going to acknowledge that you did X? Oh, you're really confrontational. In other words, you have a problem, don't you? I don't have a problem. I've hurt you and I'm moving on. That's my stickler right there. I cannot stand that. But what I know to be the truth is that God has been bringing me along, however slowly, because I'm kicking and screaming, not wanting to come, that I have to forgive. And it's not like he doesn't provide the mechanism for which I can do that. He has his word. He has given me wise counsel from other people that I can talk to and not gossip, but just get it off my chest and pray together and offer the forgiveness that's owed, because I want to be forgiven. And that's the big deal here. If you want to be forgiven by your Father in heaven, you have to forgive. Even the people who don't ask. Even the people who in our minds don't deserve it, because none of us deserve it. Especially not the people who won't apologize, but none of us deserve it. Got a long way to go, you guys. Anyway, that's the show for today. God bless you. Have a great night tonight, and we'll be back with you tomorrow.